Hello, everyone. One quick ask. If you wouldn't mind going to the iTunes podcast area and giving us a rating and maybe a little bit of a review, that would be awesome. It really helps out the show, boosts everything to where more people can see what we're doing. Thank you. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. This show is a bit of a special one for me. It's going to be with my sister and my brother-in-law, so Marni and Andre Moore. Marni is my older sister. She's my half-sister on my father's side. And we sat them down. They have a bit of an interesting background. Marni and Andre have been married since they were pretty young, I think early 20s, and then they had a kid very, very recently after that. They are a mixed-race couple, which there's some interesting, fun stuff to talk about with that and their lives that they've gone through. They have two daughters who are they're grown and out of the house, so they're on the... Wow. Well, one of them's out of the house, one of them's still at the house. But so there's some stuff to talk to about them, kind of the opposite of Laura and Rusty with the new kid versus the older there. And Andre was in the military, and he's retired from being in the military, and... we got to talk a lot about the dynamic of a father who's away and then comes back and enters back into the home. That was some stuff that I personally have no experience with or no understanding of. So there's a lot of interesting stuff for me. I think it was a darn good conversation. I look forward to hearing what you guys think of it. Let's talk about what's on our minds. Taz, what's going on in your mind this week?
I've been kind of just playing off the last week of trying to deal with not having enough time is how to manage my stress, anxiety levels around the kids. So when I am feeling sort of tense or if I have stuff to do, trying not to take it out on them, because my stress and my anxiety I feel are somewhat kind of irrational at the moment. They're not real, even though they feel very real to me. They're kind of just based on the unknown of leaving our home for 5 months.
Right.
So just trying to manage that with them, and when Oaks or Arrow do things that they normally do, and I act differently to how I normally act, just trying to rein that in a little bit.
Nice. Mm-hmm. I think for me recently, I've been reflecting on something. I don't know if we talked about it in my. It was Laura and Rusty's podcast that we did, but it was there was a revelation that I think you figured out that I still lack empathy. Yeah. So I grew up thinking I had no empathy because somebody told me what empathy was, where it's you feel other people's pain, and I was like, I just don't do that, which I guess is a sociopathic tendency, but I kind of, when I was a young, arrogant kid, took a little pride, and I was like, yeah, I don't feel other people's pain, whatever, I just do what I do. And then when I became a coach, I learned that in order to connect with people, you have to feel for them. You have to feel what they're going through and have some sort of an understanding of what they're going through so that you can effectively communicate. And that goes for kids too. And I thought that I had gained empathy, but then when we redefined what empathy was, we kind of had this light bulb moment of I didn't gain empathy. I'm just sympathetic and I care about it now. And so I guess empathy is you feel other people's pain. Sympathy is you can see other people's pain. You see it and you feel, I guess empathy is you feel it, and sympathy is, I see that you're in pain. I feel for you. You say something like that rather than you genuinely have that emotion. This might be not a hard, fast definition, but I think the big thing that I'm thinking about right now is, even though I lack empathy, I now care about the sympathy that I have. And whereas before, I wouldn't care if I saw somebody else in distress or whatever it may be. It was a certain level of arrogance that I think that I no longer have. And I think what's allowed me to be more effective now as a coach or as a father is I can care about the sympathy that I have. So all of you out there who maybe lack some empathy, recognize that you lack empathy and you don't maybe feel other people's pain, but realize that you caring about the pain that somebody else is going through is going to be huge in your communication with people. And it still crops itself up negatively for me sometimes, where I just don't feel for someone and I interact in a situation and then I have to reflect on it and be like, they took that horribly because I didn't recognize the pain they had. But I think lacking empathy, but having sympathy and caring about sympathy is the next best thing for me. Nice. So I've been thinking about that a lot recently. Anywho, let's jump into the episode with Andre and Marni Moore. On Facebook, she hyphenates it Barber Moore.
I was about to say.
Enjoy. All right, well, let's jump into the story. So let's go in. So we're here with, what was your name again?
Marni Barber Moore.
We're here with Marni Barber Moore and Andre, not Barber Moore.
I tried. He wouldn't go for that.
No. He wouldn't go for it.
Put the foot down.
Marni.
You're hyphenated?
No, she's just throwing that.
That's my Facebook.
Is it really?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh, like in the parentheses.
No.
Right?
It just says Marni Barber Moore. Yeah.
If you're wondering why the last name sounds familiar, Marni is my sister and Andre is her husband, who is now my brother. And we figured we'd bring them on because they have some interesting stuff to talk about. And I think the thing we should start out with is actually, before we even get into who they actually are, let's start out with the bean burrito story. I want to hear the real bean burrito story. Like, put it on tape here. Let's talk about it.
Oh, so the bean burrito story.
Speak towards the mic if you can.
So we were, our daughter's about 6 months old.
Living in Oklahoma. No family.
Let's see, I was, with my military service, I was gone for like half of her first 6 months. I was gone they were born 6 days later. They're on a plane coming to California. I'm going to training. They come back. We're back for a couple months. And then Marty's back on a plane and I'm going to more training. And when we get back, Marty's had to have the surgery. Had to have her gallbladder removed. So I'm with this 6-month-old baby that is not digging me and while she's in the hospital. And so it was a couple days of that. And I finally think I've got my stuff together. Literally, I got my poop in a group. So I'm driving back from the hospital. I was like, I'm going to stop and get some Taco Bell.
Got some.
Got some.
Yeah.
So I'm crawling, going to the house, juggling stuff. I got baby, car seat, diaper bag, and bag of Taco Bell, some yummy Taco Bell goodness. And I get to the door, and I'm like, oh, my burrito exploded. So I go and I lick my arm, and it's not burrito.
You licked it.
Yeah, our daughter had a blowout, a magnificent blowout.
A poopocalypse, I like to call it.
Yes, poopocalypse. So that was all down my arm, and I licked it thinking that it was a bean burrito.
And you're sitting there tasting it on your doorstep being like,
I've never had that
Luckily,
story.
she was breastfed,
Yeah,
and
breastfed
it was,
mostly,
yeah, it's
sweet.
still human
it was not
poop, but that's okay.
as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, so yeah, that is my claim to fame. That is how I know I love my daughter, because I did not just leave her.
And he's the best dad of all time, because how many of you have stepped up?
And ate my kid's poo?
Yeah.
We haven't done it. We haven't seen that as a necessary step
time.
in the
You have
loving
time.
process. But I understand the connection you guys now have.
It should be a Hallmark card. I don't know why it's not.
I can see the picture now, like on the doorstep, tongue out, going for it.
Holding everything.
Taco
Baby.
Bell down the arm.
At least you didn't drop her.
Well, and to make things worse, we had prepared for the surgery, so I had pumped and everything was ready, and then I had complications. So we were not prepared for the extra 3 days that I was back in the hospital. So she wouldn't take a bottle. So he was like struggling to feed her, and she just started rice cereal, and it was a mess. So props to him that he survived. They survived.
We did.
They're good. Well, let's get into who you guys are now. So why don't you, the question we asked, you've listened to the podcast, is we ask you to describe yourself to like a group of kids. Like, what's the terminology that we use? Like, my name is Marni and I blah. And like, what do you do? How do you describe yourself?
Okay. My name is Marni, and I'm a mother, and I am a former military spouse and wife to Andre, and I work with special needs kids.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm Andre. I was previously in the United States Air Force. I'm I'm a husband and a father, and I currently coach CrossFit.
And
Heck
he's from Texas.
Yes, which is important.
very important. For
Well,
Marni's
speaking
sake.
of where you're from, like we like to ask, done this in the last, this will be our second one now. Like, go over your background a little, like how you were raised, like differently, and because you and Pat have the same father but different mothers, and I think
Right.
you guys were raised quite differently.
No, we pretty much had the exact same child rearing. I think we couldn't get more polar opposite mothers. Like, I don't think, is it possible to have more opposing mothers?
Not in a negative way.
Not in a negative way,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just like,
Very
just
different.
Very different.
completely
Completely
different.
Yeah, so you want to just quickly...
Yeah, so we have an older brother, Jason, and he and I were born and raised in Boulder Creek in the mountains here in Santa Cruz, up until about the age of 4, and then my parents divorced.
Quick side note: Boulder Creek actually is one of the serial killer capitals of the world. It has a very high density of serial killers. But just throwing that out there, keep going.
It's super like Unabomber in a shack.
It is a podunk little place, but it's beautiful.
Yes.
It's just
and there's a lot of
definitely
people that live there that just want to be in their own space.
Yeah.
And that's why they're there.
like serial killers.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think rather than serial killers now, it's more like the pot growing.
Yeah, fair enough.
It
fair
is
enough.
turned to that, although they might coexist.
Yeah.
So yeah, grew up with kind of hippie parents, and I was born in '72. So we lived in on a school bus for a year, and then we lived in a teepee over the summer, which was all fun and interesting, but just great growing up there. And then when I was 7, I moved over the hill to Campbell, which is close to San Jose. And just lived a very different life than I had in Boulder Creek of not, hippies and all that fun stuff. And just had a normal childhood. When I was in middle school, Patrick was born, and I got to watch the birth. It's pretty cool, interesting. And but yeah, I think I was like 10 when our dad married your mom, Debbie. And so I had Debbie as a stepmom, and then Patrick and John G were born, and I got to be I was more like an aunt than a sister, but it was cool. I really enjoyed them. So, and then I moved to Arizona when I was 21, and then met Andre, and that was 1995. We got married. Mm-hmm. So we've been married. It'll be 23 years coming up.
Nice.
That's me.
Nice.
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and lived on both sides of the river until I was around 8, in which time we moved to Texas. My early childhood, spent a lot of time. It was just my real dad wasn't in the picture, and I think I've probably seen him 4 or 5 times in my life. Yeah, so hopped around a lot spent a lot of time with either living with family members, a lot of times with my grandma, who just turned 88. Was it Friday? Mm-hmm. Friday. She just turned 88 on Friday, and then and then we moved to Texas. My mom, she married Fernandez King, who I consider to be my father, and they're still there. But I lived there until I was, St. Louis until I was around 8, then Texas until I was 18, and then I was off to college, and then.
Your sister.
Yeah, I do have a little sister, and she's about 5.5 years younger than me, and she was probably my primary responsibility growing up.
Nice. She's 5 years younger.
5 years younger, yeah.
Okay, and then you met Marni, and then you had kids, and we talked about one of them so far. That was Sienna, who pooped all over your arm. Mm-hmm. So you have Sienna and McKinley, and how old are they now?
Sienna's 22 and McKinley's 19.
So you're like on the tail end of it. So everyone we've interviewed so far has been like, especially our last episode, it was brand new.
Everybody had young.
Mm-hmm. So you guys are on like a different spectrum than what we're used to. Mainly because you're really old. Mm-hmm. But other than that,
totally.
I think
crypt keeper.
You can give some good perspective on stuff that we have no idea coming in.
Right.
So looking back on your guys' raising of these 2 lovely girls, if you had to change one thing, like one thing that you've done, like maybe not even an instance or like, but just something like throughout the raising of these kids, if you had to change one thing, what do you think you'd change?
I think for me, we were 22 when we got married, 23 when we had our first kid. So we basically met in July, married in April, and had a baby in October. So
That's good. I mean, that's quick.
And we lived in different states up until I was 7 months pregnant. So I would say, looking back, I mean, I obviously wouldn't change anything. We had a great time, but it would have been cool to be married for a little bit and like experience each other and get to travel a little bit and do those kind of things, because first of all, we're super young. So even just trying to raise kids when you are trying to figure who you are out. And then with all of that happening, trying to come together as a marriage and figure that out, like I feel like there were a lot of things that it took us a long time to work out, that maybe if we were a little older, we would have been like, well, this is who I am and this is how we need to come together, rather than, I don't know who I am, but I don't like you doing that, but now I got this kid I'm trying to make hurt, So that would be the thing, maybe if we would have waited a couple years, even maybe I waited a couple years to get married, of knowing each other and dating, whatever. But yeah, that choice was not made for us.
What about you?
What does that mean?
Looking back at like more like the raising of the kids, if there's anything like you can think in the raising of the kids, is there anything you would have done differently?
With my military time, I was just gone a lot. I'd have been around more. I think we like sat down and looked at it, and for my old, it was like 8 to 9 years that I was gone.
Out of 20, yeah.
Out of 20. Yeah.
That's gnarly.
Yeah, so
that's... And it's not like gone and then back. It's like gone and then back and then gone and then back. And there's an adjustment period every time they leave, an adjustment period every time they come back. And it's hard on us. It's hard on both of us, Do
you still feel that like strain now with the girls, or do you feel like since you've been back for a few years now, have things changed, or how has that affected the relationship now with them as adults?
It's I don't think it's affected. I think we did a good enough job laying the groundwork coming up, that now that it's been back, it's just been we're excited to bring the family together. Yeah. Now there are some growing pains in there with communication and everything like that reintegration period. But it's been pretty amazing.
I think there were a lot of times in the growing up phase where they would come to me for all their needs. Like there's one of my favorite stories where I'm in the tub and they're like, knock, 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 knock. And I'm like, what do you want? Can you get me a glass of water? Where's your dad? Sitting next to me on the couch. It's like, but they're so used to me meeting those needs. Yeah. And so I become the one that provides those things. And for kids, like even though his job, because I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, was providing the financial, the structure, the house, all those things. They don't see that part. They just know that mom feeds me, and mom, it's not to compare it, but it's like dogs. My dogs follow me everywhere because I feed them. I take them out. So they love on other people, but I am the one that meets those needs. And so that was kind of what it was for our kids, is like, I meet those needs. So they would walk past him to come ask me for stuff because I'm the one that meets those needs. So I think...
which is kind of great, because then he doesn't have to do... he doesn't have to get their water and stuff.
Right.
Like, he can sit on
watch
the
the rest of the
couch.
game. This is awesome.
You don't want to get that water while you're sitting in the tub.
And that was a lot of like, could you, when you see them coming for me, could you intervene? So I'd hear him, hey, where you going? Where you going? But it was, so that was a hard adjustment. I would say just for that stuff. And I think that the last couple years, they've connected with him on a different level because they're adults and stuff. And so I really feel like the last, high school years, whatever, that they had a different relationship. So that was solid.
It seems that way. It doesn't seem like there's any, it's from an outside point of view.
Right.
It seems like you guys are all pretty
really
close,
connected. And like, I was going to ask, like, what would it be, what would you, when you came back, every time you would come back and you'd be re-entering into this kind of group of three, like, was it hard to not assert authority, but like, was it hard to be a part of it? Like, was it hard to figure out, like, did you pay attention to what was going on and try to insert yourself, or was it like, I'm gonna let them do their thing and like hopefully if they need some help, they'll ask me? Like, what was the, like, coming back into it and then out and then into it then out?
I think it kind of evolved over time, because kind of I think in the first few times with coming back and forth, there was just kind of this expectation that your place at the table is gonna still always be there, but right. if you're gone for 6 months, there's no need to have 4 plates out. You only need to have 3. So you kind of need to come in and prep for that. But then also, you're not necessarily ready to just jump in there and do that when you come back, So there was some of that. By my last deployments, it was it was kind of an understood thing, especially like when I came back from Iraq in 2011. And I remember when I got back from that, I was Mr. Family Man. It's like there's literally anything that they wanted to do.
Right.
I did not, it's nothing. I know you should have picked this thing up like 3 hours ago or 3 weeks ago, but let's jump in the car and let's go get and do whatever. Because you can't ever make up for time.
Right.
But you can do everything you can with the time that you have.
Yeah. So what would you offer as advice for someone who's like in your similar situation right now, who's going through it, the same sort of deal where they're going and they're coming back? Like, what's something you could give them that you think might help them? Something that you had to figure out that you were like, oh, whoops, or whatever it may be, or
just be present and all your opportunities to be home, be present during all those opportunities. So, because like I say, you're not going to get that time back.
Right.
And your kids grow up way faster than you're prepared for. So, make as many of those moments count while you can.
I think one of the problems we had too is like when he was gone, I was in charge. Mm-hmm. And when he was gone, he was in charge. So then he'd come back and we're both trying to be in charge. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of the one I remember the most is we lived up in Yuba City, and when he left there were no mosquitoes, and he came back and there were mosquitoes, and our kids would wake up with just mosquito bites all over their face because they'd be in the house. So it was like the 5th time I had said, hey, could you close the door when you go out? And I just saw his whole body cringe, and I went, oh my God, I'm this horrible nag. But just close the door, And so we had to kind of talk about that, and I'm not trying to be your mom, but you weren't here when that happened, and so that was a big adjustment for us. Every time he came back was trying to now renegotiate, and then once he went back to work, everything kind of mellowed because they gave you 2 weeks off. And so for those 2 weeks, it was just like a constant, like, how do we do this? And now he's here, so can you do this with this kid? And it was just a lot of adjustments and stuff. And so over the years, we figured that out. But that was
so it sounds like hard. The biggest adjustments were between the two of you.
Yeah.
And maybe do you think it had anything to do with like you said, like the young marriage, or maybe not? Maybe that's just
I think that
a bit of both.
With marriage, you're always working stuff out,
sure.
And so when they're gone, it's hard to work that stuff out. I mean, we talked a lot, and we could, back in the old days, we wrote letters and that kind of stuff, and then
adorable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
sealed it with your family crest. Sorry.
All
right,
put it on a raven and
keep tie it to a pigeon's leg.
Sent my owl. Okay. But yeah, I mean, so that now we're trying to talk about it, but he's not here in the house anymore, and so that's the kind of stuff that's kind of hard. And both of our girls had some anxiety, and I think a lot of it had to do with like the constant instability of
the moving and the changing,
and you think about kids, like even your kids, like they know who their friends are, they know who comes to the house, they know they can count on, and then you move and you give all of that up, like even me as an adult woman, all my friends are gone. So I would go to like one of the events and I would like scope out the moms and be like, no, she looks cool. And then I'd see them with their kids, like bratty kids. I'm like, oh, no, I can't be friends with her, But I, as an adult, to make them friends,
judgmental at all.
It's not. But when you're bringing your kids around those other kids, sometimes it's rough. But no, I mean, trying to make friends as an adult is a whole different ballgame when you don't have necessarily kids things. So I'm at this officer spouses club we used to go to, and there's just a room full of women and they're all friends already. Like now, how do you
cool, this is great.
Right.
All right, cool.
It's like moving to a high school every 3
Oh,
years,
yeah.
and you're like, how do I get in? And then you meet somebody and you're like, she's super cool, and then you realize nobody likes her for a reason. Now how do I get rid of this person, because now she's been like the first person that's nice to me? I mean, there's all these weird, it literally is maybe even junior high, like going to a new junior high and you're meeting all new friends.
So if someone's in your, like, what advice would you give to a military wife? So like what's something that that, hey, I made this mistake, so you don't have to?
Yeah.
What's something you would give them that would help them out?
Well, for me, it ended up just being I had to. I mean, I'm not an introvert at all, but I had to be an extrovert, and you just have to go up and meet as many people as possible, and not just the one girl that approached you because nobody likes her. She's like, new girl. So I just learned to, like, we'd go to the park. I'd talk to everybody. And then I would have, 10 friends, and then I could pick and choose if something went down. There was always a group of people, but I mean, almost every base I had a pretty good group of friends. But even then, you meet them, and then they leave in a year,
Right.
even though you leave in 3 or whatever. It's a rough road, and it's really hard for the kids to do that. And then we've lived some places too where, they're rough states.
Yeah.
Not to talk bad about any states, but where. It's not as open and welcoming to military families, number one. Number two, and if you guys can tell by our voices, but we're an interracial couple. And so moving places where, that's not okay. There's been reactions, that kind of stuff. So it's just been...
There's still places like that in the U.S., isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
It's fucking wild. Have you had any, big issues with that? Like in your guys' relationship, has there stuff ever popped up that was, people genuinely... just any issues?
I would say not as much. Definitely not people we've surrounded ourselves with. But we lived in Arkansas, and there was a town about 10 minutes north of us that we were not allowed to go to together. Or people said, you guys can go there, just bring a gun. And this is 2010? 2009, 2010?
Seems about right.
2008 to 2010.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So just, some stuff like that. And there's a lot of white people and black people in Arkansas, but there's no others. There are no other people. There's not a lot of Hispanic people. There's not a lot of Asian people. And so they're just not super tolerant of others. And so, actually our kids had a pretty good time there because there were so many white kids and black kids. But back then there used to be I wanted to go to the next district over because it was a better school. And I called and they said, well, what's your kid's race? And that's never happened to me before. And I said,
asked you that?
Oh, yeah. I said, they're white and black. And she said, well, they can't come here then because we have too many black kids. Yeah. And I went, I don't think you can ask me that. And she said, welcome to Arkansas. Yeah. And so, it shocked me. And then I worked in the school system, and it was they just had, I've heard that recently that they've quit doing it, but they had quotas. And so, in my school, there was a little boy who they had labeled just ADHD, but he was very clearly had sensory issues. Working with special needs kids, I'm like, this kid has sensory issues. So I pleaded for people to test him and get him looked at. And they said, we can't help him because he's black and there's too many black males already in the system. And I just went, what about this black kid? And she said, he'll probably end up in prison. That was his teacher.
That was his teacher?
Yeah, but she was her hands were tied.
Advocate for this poor kid,
and so she just was like, I know. And so just stuff like that. There was a lot of just frustrating,
there's nothing you can do.
Nothing you can do. So I buddied up with the OT, the occupational therapist. If he was having a bad day, she'd come get him. And she'd come take him on swings and do things that would counteract his sensory issues, and he would have a good day. And when I left, the woman that I was a special needs aide for this little girl in the class. And so the lady that took over with the little girl, I said, he's yours too. You need to help this kid. So she did. She took him under her wing. And as far as I know, took care of him for the next year or whatever. Just made sure he was okay. But stuff like that, when Andre deployed for 16 months when we were there. And I just went, I can't do this without his support there. I can't, I'm banging my head all day at work and then come home and it's just me and the kids. So I moved back to California to be closer to family because I just needed that support. But it's just hard. It's hard growing up in California and as many problems as we have here. It's just a whole different level of understanding and stuff of kids that are different or special needs or any of that stuff. So, And then Montana, we live in a really small town in Montana, and the first day of school, our daughter, who kind of looks like Mariah Carey skin tone, I guess you say. She looks a little like Kim Kardashian. She'd kill me for saying that, but
you're just talking about skin tone.
Skin tone.
She doesn't look anything like either of the two people you just mentioned. Like Mariah Carey or Kim Kardashian, not even close. But skin tone.
I was trying to
maybe.
See what Mariah Carey looked like,
just like skin tone. But anyways, the first day of high school, there, someone came up and said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "California." And they were like, "Oh, I thought you were an exchange student from Africa." And So I said to her, kids are stupid. She goes, it was a teacher.
It was a teacher.
And
Cool,
just
cool, cool,
because
cool,
she
cool.
has tan skin, like that, she's so different that she must be from another country. It was weird. So, but the good thing is she got grouped with all the exchange students. So she had these amazing friends from like 13 countries. And we had her surprise birthday party a couple months later and had all these like amazing girls from all over the world. And so it ended up being good, but just weird stuff like that. So nothing, I mean, we haven't had anything horrible. Our girls have been pretty lucky, you know, and they're pretty solid in who they are. That if something like that were to happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd give a parent of a mixed race child, like any sort of advice, like going into the whole situation? Like,
Just making sure that they know who they are. So for me, I always wanted to
making sure who knows who they are.
the girls.
Oh, gotcha.
So making sure that they are as solid as they could be in who they are, so that when somebody says something to them, which is going to happen eventually, they know that's not true, or that's not who I am, or, you know, I always wanted them to be like around more people that were black in like Andre's family and stuff. Unfortunately, with us moving as much, it's harder to do, but when we lived there, we went up as much as possible because I want that influence. I want them to be around proud, strong black women, which Andre's family, they are, and as much as possible, so that they are like, damn right I am, you know. I'm super proud of that. And so
what about from your perspective, Andre? Because like you got obviously a different perspective on the whole situation. Is there any advice you'd give parents?
I'd go along a lot with what Marni's saying. It's like, and I think this goes to all parenting, and not just with whether your child's biracial or any other issue. You know, the more you make them confident in who they are, the less likely they're to be swayed into bad decisions.
Right.
You know, so you establish a strong value system within them, and then, you know, you help to instill that they have value themselves outside of what they believe, and that's going to lead them in the right way, especially in those times when you can't be there.
Right.
So,
what's one thing you can do to like help instill that? Is it modeling it, or is it something that you talk to them about?
I think you model it out, and you let them know from the day one that they are loved and that they are important people. I tell my daughters all the time that, you know, you probably hear more times before 9 o'clock that I love you, that you're beautiful, that you're intelligent than I ever heard growing up.
Right.
So if that's the one thing I can give to them, that's what I did. And that's what I've done every day that I've been around them. So.
Right. Switch gears a little. When you would go overseas like Iraq, like shit's dangerous, obviously, and the potential's there. I mean, for bad stuff to happen. Like, what psychological process do you go through of like letting go? Like, do you do that when you go over there? Like, was it something where it's like, well, going here, I have to accept the fact that bad stuff might happen. Like, what goes through your head, or is it just like, hey, block it out, and I'm just living my life day to day? How does it work?
It's a lot of it's day to day. The biggest thing for you is getting there and establishing a routine, because that routine becomes everything, and then it turns into when you deviate from that routine, because everything, once you have the routine established, that's it, and then it's just things that fit within that routine. So, like during my last stint in Iraq, I kind of timed my day off of call to prayer, because we'd have our morning call to prayer, you'd hear it, and then we get rockets and mortars, and I was like, okay, it's time to get up and go to the gym and work out, and then I'd come back home, and then evening call to prayer, we get rockets and mortar. Okay, it's time to go to bed.
rockets and mortars meaning bombs going off in the background.
Yeah,
Right.
like bombs going off, things getting shot.
It's
It's
not
not
like
code.
reality there.
It's not code for something else.
It's like, oh, this is what happens next.
So building a routine around just making sure the same stuff kind of happens every day.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then you just in those things that are weird, like say, like getting shelled or getting rockets shot at you, that just
falls into routine.
Yeah, it gets compartmentalized into something that you do, and you don't think about it.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you were saying that you, for a lot of your childhood, you didn't grow up with the father figure. How has that, and then you were essentially thrown into a father figure role by being your sister's caregiver. Do you think that kind of set you up for fatherhood before becoming a real father? Or do you, and the way you fathered now, was that like a direct, like, I didn't have a dad, I'm going to be this type of dad, or just kind of evolved naturally?
I think we're a sum of all our experiences. I just know what I did not have in my life and what I always looked forward to, and what I wanted to be. So I was like Ray, who's he was with my mom pretty early on. I think like right before we moved to Texas, him and my mom got together, and then they eventually got married.
You were like 10?
I was probably 8 or 9. I think I was about 12 when I was 12 when they got married. But it's taking in someone that's not your child and raising them that's a tough gig, and I don't think a lot of people want to sign on for it. But hats off to him for taking us in, taking care of us, and doing everything he could. But I would say a lot of things that were kind of in my growing up where we didn't have a lot, so my folks were doing as much as they could to make sure that we had a place to live and we could eat and things like that. So some of my things are not. It's not. I wouldn't say it's not having a father figure. It's just some of the things you have to do to survive.
Right.
And luckily, we weren't in that position. Like I said, we had the opportunity for Marni to stay home, especially with me traveling as much as I was.
Right.
But we definitely struggled
financially. But we definitely struggled too.
Right. But it was important enough that we...
But what I would say, the thing I know is that I didn't always have somebody there to talk to or to be with. So I was kind of building an airplane while I was flying it with some of my growing up, but I didn't ever want my kids to have to deal with that.
Right.
So that is kind of, that desire for them to be better than, to have it better than what I did, kind of, that shapes a lot of my parenting.
Right. And we definitely tried to make sure that they were connected even when he was gone. So even during times where he couldn't call till after their bedtime, before he left, they'd make a basket together, and it was called like Daddy Kisses, and we'd fill it with chocolate kisses. And then every night before they go to bed, the girls would each take a kiss from Daddy, and they'd eat it as their little dessert, and they'd say, "Thanks, Daddy," and so like we had a picture of him on it and stuff like that. Yeah. So even though they couldn't talk to him all the time, like there was still that connection during the day. So
you made that effort for them to be connected.
Totally. And then Andre read some books on tape, and so that we would listen to it before they went to bed and stuff. And there's so now technology is completely different, but
FaceTime and all that
stuff. I mean, you can do all that. They couldn't necessarily back then, and so we tried to make sure we talked about him a lot and that kind of stuff. We had pictures of him.
Well, that's great. I mean,
right. Those were all things. I mean, you could even do that when he's gone, whatever. And it's like, I mean, not necessarily chocolate kisses, but but I guess they could talk. But it's different when he's in a different time zone, and it's rough to talk. But yeah, so we did. I mean, that's a lot of military stuff. You put the little rings up and take one down each day that they're gone, and then they get extended, and you secretly put new rings on there.
Or you add more kisses to
them. We would just throw more kisses in the basket because they were too young to really get that we'd had more. But yeah, he'd be like, "I'm going to be another, 30 days." You're like, okay.
And how would you take that? Like when you were told, another 30 days, you're like, all right, well.
That didn't happen too much. We actually had one time where he was supposed to deploy, and I mean, like, we were prepared. We had his bags ready, and then they called it off, and we were like sucker punched, and everybody's like, "Yay, we prayed that he wouldn't have to go," and I'm like, no. We were prepared for him to go. Like, pray that he's safe, but not necessarily that he didn't have to go, because we have it all planned,
right?
And
you gotta leave.
Yeah. I mean, the kids were prepared.
They were ready.
We have to all mentally really get there, and then they just said,
The great thing, so we get them all, in the living room. It's like, hey, Daddy doesn't have to go. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna be staying here. And Sienna's like, well, you said we were going to Disneyland when you got back. Are we still going to Disneyland?
Yeah. That was like the focus. Was like, wait a minute, because again, we had all mentally you know, and it's rough to prepare for them to leave. It's very stressful. Just, you know, because you have to make everything work, you know.
So being, you guys kind of touched on it, but being a young couple, you guys had to go through some shit. Like you had kids young, you were gone a lot, you'd come home, you had to grow up with kids, and then you're still together. You've been together for 23 years. It's like many other people would have done different things in those situations. Like, what advice could you give to someone who's in your similar situation? Like, you've got a young marriage, like shit might not be working as smoothly as you would have expected. Like, what are the things that you guys did to like fight through it, or to, I mean, did you go to counseling? Like, what was it that like that for you and both your minds were like, we're sticking this through and we're gonna make this happen and we're gonna get after it?
Well, counseling's one thing, and we did that even when things were good. So it's not like we didn't have, not like we were like, well, we have this crisis, now we need to go get help.
It's like,
or periodically it was like, well, the military's offering us this counseling, we should go and just, you know, preventive maintenance.
So not just weirdos go to counseling.
Not just weirdos go to counseling.
I say that as a joke, by the way. I've gone to counseling like my whole life.
Well, everyone can communicate better.
Yeah,
you always can do that. As far as like having a long marriage, I tell you know, friends and folks that I know that are getting engaged now, tell them the same thing. You know, always remember the thing that made you fall in love with your spouse, because like in 10 or 20 years, it's probably going to be the most annoying thing that they do. It'll be it's funny that it's that way. So it's true. It's true. So like for me with Marni, the thing that I love about her the most, she's the most caring person that I know.
right.
And that's the thing that annoys you the most.
Oh, it just sometimes.
Well, yeah, I mean,
but it's
Marni, you don't have to care about that.
Yeah,
it's somebody else's shit.
Yeah, it's somebody else's stuff. You know, or it's like, you know, it's
Bring that into this house.
It'd be like if, you know, and she loves cats. You know, we can't save all the cats. We can't
one at a
adopt
time. One at a time I can save them.
But that's what it turns into. You know, it's like, you know, it's just you've either got to sign on the fact that you're going to give room to be themselves and you're going to go wherever that road takes you, or you probably shouldn't do it.
Right.
So.
But we have to work some of that stuff out, because his issue is that I help other people, and then it affects us and them in the house.
Yes.
Because then I'm gone doing those things, or I'm taxed because I've given everything, and I come home and, like he said, like, you have nothing left for us. You know, you're exhausted and all those kind of things, and it's hard. It's hard for me in my head to not do those things because somebody needs help. Yeah. So you just, you know, Superwoman, I got to go help these people because I can, and I think in my head I can, you know, and so it doesn't ever cross my mind to not. And so, but I have to remember, like, okay, I've got to, tamper that down a little bit, tailor it so that it's not affecting them, and do those kind of things. So I'm super passionate. Like, we have this neighborhood cat that is like the coolest cat. And when it's raining and stuff, I can't sleep because it's so cold and rainy outside, and he sleeps outside. Aww. And so I made him a cat house. I bought a little disc that you warm in the microwave, and he can sleep on top of it, keep him warm at night. And little shitter wouldn't use it. But anyway,
I like my face.
But I literally, because then I could sleep.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, he has a choice. He's choosing to not sleep on it. But that is who I am. We had in Arkansas that we had this horrible storm, and I look out and there's this pigeon or a dove in a nest, and I couldn't sleep. I was literally trying to think of how I could make him a canopy, a little umbrella, because the suffering of children or animals and stuff, it's life changing.
So all of my father's empathy was wasted on her. Because
wasted?
No, not wasted, but it went into you. So like, I completely, like we talked about this last episode, I lack empathy. So like, and I thought I had become more empathetic, and then we defined empathy as like actually feeling other people's stuff, and I realized I didn't become more empathetic. I just started to care about my sympathy. So I can have sympathy. I can see a situation and be like, that's not a good situation.
You feel bad for it.
And I can feel bad for it.
You're,
and like,
you're not in their shoes.
I've never been in their shoes. But what I've learned to do is like, change my view on my sympathy and be like, I need to change and make it better for that person.
Right.
But it's not because I'm feeling it.
Right.
Like, that's still to this day has never happened where someone's having a hard time and I'm
Right.
like, man, I'm right there with you.
Right.
Do you remember Sienna and narcissism?
Yeah. Sienna said, it's not that I don't have a heart, it's that I'm a narcissist. And she was like so proud of herself. I go, that is not a good thing.
Yeah, she's like,
But she was like, she had labeled it like, I'm just a narcissist.
She's like, yeah, it's like it's not that I don't have empathy for other
Yeah.
people. It's just I just can't physically put myself
That's
in those
exactly-
shoes,
Right.
in those
Which is a
situations.
narcissist.
Which is a narcissist. So she's like, boom,
But
winning.
I
and
love it how
walking away.
she's so aware of it, though.
Oh, totally.
She's just claims it.
But I think that she might have a similar shift to me where she starts to understand that she can positively impact people in such a way that now it's a matter of how can you go through the world with this level of confidence that certain levels of narcissism give you,
Right.
And
Because she totally is.
and bring the world up
Hyper-confident.
it's not because you're feeling like, oh man, I gotta feel this situation out and connect with it. It's like you realize that's your role,
Right.
And
And that
happens.
comes with maturity and age and experiences that when you're 22.
So
that's
how,
gonna
so how do you think she became like that? Because you're so...
because you completely rebel, right?
But she's been like that her whole life.
She's been like that from about the age of 5 or 6.
Okay.
Because
before
she's
that.
exactly one way.
Gotcha.
And she's like, I'm not going to be that way. I'm going to be the other way.
Right.
So Sienna used to. Before it was like popular, she would write "I love me" on all her stuff.
She was, she was really young.
Yeah, and but you're a product of your parents. Marni,
He's got a little bit of the confidence thing.
them are a ridiculous amount of confidence.
I think it's the firstborn.
Yeah, I think so. Sienna's,
Oh, sure.
She's a little bit like me. Like I said, I truly believe, given time and some resources, I can figure out anything in the world. Sienna's.
Yeah.
She pretty much.
she's
I think she thinks she knows everything already, so she doesn't
I
need
think
either.
almost
of
all firstborns just have a touch of the asshole. They're not touch
That's
of the
not
asshole.
that's not a
But
good.
we don't
that's not a
touch
good.
assholes.
We don't. That's not a good way to phrase it.
A touch of the asshole gene, where it's just like,
Yeah.
screw you. Yeah, and Sienna, the good thing is I never had to worry about peer pressure with her. She was like, I think it's stupid that people, you were like that too. I think it's stupid that people smoke pot. Like, I just think that's stupid. Of course I'm going to tell them no. And then she would say, you better be careful with McKinley because she's a people pleaser like you. And so here she's like parenting me. But the funniest thing we always tell Sienna is just use it for good. Just use it for good and not evil. Like, she's super wicked, like she's wicked smart. She's got this great sense of humor. She's hysterical. Like, she keeps us laughing all the time. But if she turns it the other way, it's wicked. I mean,
Well, but
not
it's,
wicked,
you don't understand your power until you age. Like, it's maturity. Like,
Right.
you have to hit at an age where you have some sense of self-reflection, and that doesn't happen. It didn't happen to me until I had kids.
well, you have to have something that knocks you down a little bit and gives you that holy crap. And having kids is very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you have to go, whoa. And so, I mean, Sienna's been like this, it's amazing. She's a world traveler and she just jumps. She goes and does these things. And then McKinley is a mini me. She's compassionate and sweet. And, that is her reputation, is that she's the sweetest helper. You come home and she's like, would you need help? And we always joke that Sienna would
Like, you
say,
fucking with me? What are you trying to get from me?
yeah, that'd be Sienna.
that
That's
is
Sienna.
right there.
No, Sienna said, when you guys are old, you can't live with me because old people creep me out. And she goes, well, you guys can live in my attic. And McKinley goes, oh, you can live with me. Don't worry. I'll take care of you guys, And it's totally there. Sienna's like, you can live there. I just don't want to see you. And McKinley's like, you guys, we're good. We're good. You can live with me.
Well, yeah, it's so amazing. So same upbringing, such different kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I would also say is remember each of your kids is different.
Yeah.
Give them room to be themselves.
Yeah.
As opposed to just what you think they should be. Because I would be horrible at being Pat Barber, but I'm pretty damn good at being Andre. So,
It's true.
Yeah, and so you kind of have to do that, even though it's painful, even though you're gonna watch them fall and make some mistakes. Just give them,
And try not to compare them.
Yes.
That's another thing is it's hard for me sometimes, like when Sienna is not being helpful and McKinley is, and I'm like, oh, your sister, and she's like, oh, that's her, that's not me, and it's hard for me to be like he's saying, like, I raised you guys the same, but they're just totally different people.
Yeah.
And you have to just step back and we totally talk about the qualities of both the girls and like just how amazing both of them are in their own special way, and
It's interesting. Like their underlying moral fiber is similar. Like in the sense, I think their value structures are similar. Like
You know about my kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
totally.
any siblings, like
Yeah.
even you and Jason, like at your core, you have very similar tendencies.
Very much so.
But how they express themselves is totally different.
Right.
But at its core, I think that's what, as a parent, you can really make or break.
Right.
Like you can make or break a kid by not raising them well, or not showing them positive things, or not enabling them to be who they are. And like you can give them a rotten core. Like, and I think the number one thing that does that I've seen is just neglect. Like if you are not present with those kids at all, like you don't give them anything.
Right.
It's like a flip of the coin. Are they going to find a positive role model later in life that somehow influences them and heads them off in the right direction?
Right.
Or are they going to rebel so hard against your lack of anything, they're going to be like, fuck you, I'm going to do it right. Or are they just going to follow that exact same path?
Right.
And I think that's, as parents, like what we can hope to do well is just like the core. Can we give the core value system?
Yeah.
Can we implement like some sort of positive change in the core? Because how they express it, like your kids have shown, it's like it's going to be vastly different.
Right.
But I see it in a 5 and 2 year old.
Right.
They're totally different human beings.
Totally. Yeah. And I like, for me, like, you know, I'm super vocal about like social injustice kind of things, and you know, one of our kids will come home and be like, I was fighting with this person online about this thing. And it's like, yes, because they care, and they're eloquent, and they, you know, it just, those kind of things just go, yes, you get it. You know, you made it to an adult, and you care about things, and you are not willing to let, you know, because I know that my kids will totally step up if somebody's being bullied or those kind of things. And that, for me, my main goal was to raise them as good human beings. You know, I want them, I loved what Rory was saying too about being good decision makers. Yeah. Like you want them to do that. But like for me too, it's also about just being good human beings and stepping up. And, you know, when you see somebody hurting, you step in and help and those kind of things, because that's, you know, even though Sienna like talks like she doesn't, she'll be like, oh mom, hey, I did this thing or whatever. And it's like, oh, those are those little things of me in there, you know? It's like,
does that feel good? Like knowing, like, because you
so
are,
good.
like Pat said, you're on the other side, and we're still like in the thick of it, like, it feels like a gamble,
right?
Still,
it is,
because
always,
you know we're not going to see
right.
like that.
No, we've seen some cool stuff. Even today, check out today. Like we had these people over, and the 2 kids were leaving, and one of them was holding a Lego, and the woman was like, "Oh, you got to put the Legos back," and Oaks was like, "No, I gave him that."
Yeah, that's good.
And I gave him that one too, so he gets that one. He gets that one. And so he gave him his Legos, and I was like, yes. You know, like,
totally.
I was like, yes, this is my 5-year-old. He's most of the time a total dick to other kids, but like for some reason he connected with these guys, cool. You know, like, and so we're even seeing it now.
Yeah, no,
like,
it's true. We for sure are.
And part of the thing with parenting is it's not like a job where you get a paycheck or you get a raise, you get a pat on the back. Like you don't until they go out into the world. And you know, like even the kindergarten, Sienna's teacher was like, if I could have my own child, it would be Sienna. And I was like, oh, that's huge, right? We made this amazing kid, you know? And then later on, like, you know, all these adults say, you know, you can have your own things with your kids at home, but for me, for them to be good citizens out in the world, and like other people are like, they're so respectful and those kind of things. So even though at home maybe the kids are fighting, they go out in the world and people are like, they're such great kids and stuff like that. To me, those are like, it sometimes takes until they're adults or teenagers or whatever till you finally get to see all that work. And so those little moments like that are important to remember, because otherwise it's like, what am I doing? Where are we headed?
That'll tell you you're on track, because like, see, we've been on there comes a time where kids just kind of enter that rebellious phase, and you go from overnight, you're the smartest, greatest superhero in the history of superheroes, to the dumbest person that has ever walked the earth. And it'll literally happen in an evening, and you won't know it happened, and your little baby will now be this monster that
smart mouth and
that is always on the phone and never comes out of their room and never does anything around the house.
We're not talking about either of our kids specifically.
Is it right around 10?
Sienna was like 6.
Yeah.
She, about age 6, all of a sudden, she was a teenager. But she's a super old soul and just has always like known more than she should at that age. And you're like, wow, well, this kid has this weird knowledge. And so she, about age 6, all of a sudden, she was like attitude and stuff like that. But again, it's not even always him, mainly me. But a counselor said one time, like, you're her soft place to fall. So these kids go to school all day and they, do everything they're supposed to do and they follow all these rules and, they're going to traditional school. So this. And they come home and they have to get it out somehow. And so sometimes it's thrown up on you. Right. And that's your job as a mom, is just to take it, talk to them about it, see if you can, but that's the role of the house, is the soft place to fall and to be vulnerable and all those things. And it's hard when you're that parent, like, especially when he was gone, because, she would come home and just, and it wasn't like, my day was so hard. It was like, no matter what I said, it was arguing and that kind of stuff. But once I realized that, it was like, okay, I get it. I mean, it's like when we've had a hard day and you come home and you're just like, blah. And then later you can come back and go, I'm sorry, I had a really hard day. They just don't have the comeback.
Right.
They don't come back and say that. But you just have to go, it's rough sometimes being a kid and being a teenager and being good all day and following all the rules. And
well, until you don't have that, you don't have that frame of reference. Like, literally when you're a teenager, everything that happens to you is the biggest thing that ever happened to you.
Right.
Yeah. So, eventually you get past that and you can compare it to other things that have happened in your life. But, those teenage years, that's everybody, a lot of the world is telling you that you're wrong. Yeah. And you don't even know how you feel about it yourself. But you know that you're wrong because everybody else is telling you that.
And hormones hormones are awful for kids, right? Yeah. One of our kids said one day, I said, what is going on with you? And she said, I don't know. And I went, it's hormones.
Yeah.
Because that is that feeling.
And then as men, we're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it's pretty much
slowly back out of the room.
I'm just like, pretty much always the same. Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
But even in pregency and stuff like that, women cry.
Right. I know. I know. That's why I'm referencing we don't have that. We go through our own shit, but
you guys have your midlife crisis.
We do. You know what? I was all these like great minds out there have had this thing that happens at 30, and it's just like there's a thing in Buddhism as well. It's like this 30-year awakening, and Jesus only did anything after he was 30. He turned 30, like his whole life. There's like not that much on him. 30, boom, he's got like 3 years or whatever of doing stuff, and then he does his whole ascension and whatnot. But it's like I felt that exactly at 30. Like I hit 30, and that's why I researched it and then saw all this other stuff and was like, there's this like awakening at 30 where you're like, what? And you like reflect back on. So we have but I think people who have a really shaky foundation, they'll hit 30 and they'll be like, I gotta fucking change shit up, and they go on this.
I need a red
crisis.
Sports car. Leave this white.
Right, and it might be a little bit later for some people, a little bit earlier for some people, but it's like right around those ages where you just like have this deep like turn back and look at yourself and be like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Where am I?
And am I gonna do this between now and dead?
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of times I go, no. I don't want this job anymore.
You know what's terrifying? We were talking about like the setting the core of a kid, and like if you don't, and that's like your role as a parent, and with kids who don't have the parent, it's like a flip of a coin. But like, what about the parents who have like actively negative things, and they build that into a kid, like a kid whose parent is like, yeah, I beat the shit out of my kid all the time. Like that's an okay thing, and they build that into the core of the kid, as like this is an okay thing to do. And this is like now how this kid goes through the entire world. It's like, I mean, it's amazing when we do it when it's positive, but like there are really affected kids out there.
Yeah,
and
really it's not even just physical abuse; it's mental abuse.
Yeah, I mean, beat the shit out of it in any way.
One of my favorite quotes is, when you speak negatively to a child, you write on the slate of who they are, and those kids will rise up to meet what you've set as your expectations of them, which is crap. And so I think that was a Dr. Philism.
Was it really?
Not to quote Dr. Phil.
Let's just say it was Dr. Seuss, and we'll keep it at that.
But I really like that. Like, this woman was so mean to her kid, and they were like, that is the core of who she is that you're writing on. That's totally like, you're writing that, and that's forever who she is. And she will rise up to meet that. And that's it. She's going to go, this is who I am. This is all I know. So I will never be here. And it totally stunts their growth emotionally and intellectually and all of the above. And I think it's the same with physical abuse, you know. When a kid is only in survival mode, it super affects their ability to grow. And
I saw a guy that I really respect posted something recently. Like, it was like, this is why kids talk back these days. It's because there's no corporal punishment. And it was like, I couldn't understand it. And I like him. Like, he's a little aggressive with some of the stuff that he says, and I really respect him in a lot of ways. But it really tore me up inside. It's like he genuinely has this view of like, it's okay to do that. You know, like, this kid has no other option. It's you're the kid. You're the parent. Like, right. You're the one they care about and respect more than anything else. And you are at your wit's end to the point where you hit him.
Right.
And I can understand the desire to want to do that. I can understand making the mistake where you actually like grab someone really hard, or even make like a small hit. But then immediately afterwards feeling like a giant bag of shit and being like, I'm so sorry that happened. It should never happen, you know? But to resort to that is like, this is what I do. This is what happens. This is what happens when you mouth off. And it's like, and I went and I was like, maybe that's my upbringing. You know, maybe that was my frame of
having
reference.
Parents that never
having parents who never did that. So now I'm in this world. So I'm looking up all the studies on it. And all the studies show it's like 90% of studies show that it show the only thing that it improves is in the moment compliance.
Right.
So in the moment compliance,
they make sure they do it.
They do it. Yeah. But then it sets these like deep seated shit for their entire lives. But because you see in the moment compliance, people who've maybe had that happen to them, who've done it, are like, yep, shit works.
Right.
But it's like, it's so damaging.
Because it does work in that moment.
Can you imagine if your boss at work did that?
Yeah.
Like your boss at work, the person like you respect, like say you really enjoyed the job you had. You love the job you have. You're in this job. Yeah. You're in this job that you have. You freaking love it. And it's just amazing. And all of a sudden, you know, like you step out of line and stuff gets a little squirrely and you go in and your boss just beats the shit out of you.
Right.
You know, like as an adult. And then you have to go back to this workplace where like that's an okay thing.
Right.
Like where it's
and
like
everything's okay again.
And everything's okay again. And they're treating you the same and stuff like that, and you've got bruises all over your face and like, and then anytime you step out of line, like your boss just beats the shit out of you. It's like, what?
So there was
that's ridiculous.
Girl on our base, and I really liked her, and I liked her kids and everything. And I went over to her house one day, and she had this like scroll on the wall, and it was like back talking, and it was all beautiful calligraphy, and it had like 2 wooden spoons. And then it was like, you know, 3 wooden spoons.
That was a joke.
And I go,
sure.
What is this? And she goes, these are the rules. It was not a joke. This is what they got. They did this thing. They got 2 smacks with a wooden spoon. And I just was like, why is this hanging in your house like it's art? Like it was so like, these poor kids. But, you know, I mean, that's, her kids behaved for her for those reasons. And they knew that But it was so foreign to me because our parents didn't spank us. Or my parents and your parents, but to have that just as this pretty squirrel on the wall by the kids' room of like the rules, where our rules would be like no talking back or whatever.
But I do wonder if contextually there might be a way that would fit into a world. You know, like maybe the kids are 16 and you introduce corporal punishment. You know, it's like they've got these formative years of their life where they've gone to these places and it's like they become total shitbags at 16. You've built this level of respect and you're like, hey, at 16 we're introducing this thing called corporal punishment.
Yeah.
And you now have some framework for how the world works and you know that I love you. And the last thing I want to do is hit you.
But here's the thing. And we talked about this with Sienna, who was, you know, giving me some problem. Like, at age 16, do you put them over your knee? No, now you're fighting them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know,
I don't know. I mean,
I
would.
But I was like, because I think somebody had said that to me, like, well, you should spank her. And I'm like, what do you put a 16-year-old over your knee?
Well, but
like,
I mean, that's really humiliating, right?
Totally.
But I'm just wondering if there is a frame of reference, if there is a context where that exists in a world where it's like, they can walk away from that being like, that was a really dumb thing that I did that led it to that place, you know, like.
No, I don't think
well, so. I don't know.
I mean, we're talking we're talking about like Catholic school where you put your hands out and they wrap them with the thing, but that is ingrained from the beginning of like, this is what happens.
Right, and I think
get paddled at school or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, young ages know ever, but you can hear how much it hurts me. But I'm wondering if because we're so sheltered in our way, like maybe there is a place that this fits.
I was spanked pretty severely.
You were?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, with the wooden
You too?
spoon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
With a
Yeah.
wooden spoon, with a...
Whatever was available.
Right.
So why not? Why would you then not do that to your kids?
It's awful.
Yeah.
It was awful. It was like...
And it's just what you're saying about compliance. It like turned into a recipe. It's like, okay, I did this really dumb thing. All right, I'm going to get smacked a couple times. And I'm going to cry as quickly as I can, even if I don't mean it. And then depending on the beating, maybe I'll do it again. I don't know.
You just try harder not to get caught next time.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it is. Just don't get caught.
And you have to, because you guys don't know is at that age, but about the age of 15, 16, 17, they're starting to fight back, whether it's with words or, we're talking about the rebellion thing. So then it's a fight. Now we're going to fight. Like, our dad had a thing with our grandpa where I think he was just finally tired of, and Dad said something mouthed off, and Grandpa goes, "Meet me outside." And they went outside, and Dad came out, and Grandpa just punched him in the face and knocked him to the ground, and that was the end of it. But it was like, oh my gosh! Like,
So, but like, think about that for a second. Like, so like that one time where you're like, fine, you want to throw down?
Yeah.
You want to go outside?
but
You want to make this happen?
They're on the same level. He was like, I'm giving you an opportunity to fight me.
Yeah.
It's what you're saying is just hitting them, and they can't fight you back.
But even
Keep in mind, I'm
do
trying to
that-
play devil's advocate here. Like,
Yeah.
I
You do
want to
that
see
with
this
I'm like giving you the chance to challenge me. Now
Right.
you're physically fighting your kid. Now it's Jerry Springer. You know what I mean? And
But I
like, if
kind of like that.
If I had, like, let's say, there's people who slap their kids in the face, and let's say
I watched that the other day, and I nearly walked up to this woman and did the same.
yeah. Oh, somebody did
You
it.
saw someone slap their kid in the
I
face?
watched this woman just beat the shit out of her kid, and I was like, and I didn't know what to do. I was so frozen. I was just like, "Excuse me, like." What
Like
the
where? Like
just
parking lot or something?
whack right in his
No.
face, and the kid started crying, then just reeled back and whacked him again, and I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to go say something. Like I didn't know what to do. I was frozen. It was when we went to the fishing pond, Loch Lomond. Remember, I told you we were in the parking lot, and I was like, I just saw that woman beat the shit out of her kid. It's like 10-year-old kid. Yeah, it broke my heart. But keep going.
But so I was saying, so like, let's say something happened and I slapped Sienna across the face and she hits me back. Now what? So as an adult, you can't let them win, right? Because you're trying to prove a point. Now now we're fighting.
That's it. We're fighting.
And I'm not
Put the
willing
gloves
to
on.
do that. I'm so not willing to do that because
Sienna's wiry too.
She's wiry. She's like,
and I don't want to set that up
No.
like
Yeah.
because like I said, what if she hits me back? Now what? Now I've got to hit back harder. Like that doesn't. It's just going to escalate into something that's never going to be effective.
you and I are both talking from it from a place of never having it happen. I think their opinion's slightly more valid. Like
go ahead.
No, I'm just curious. Like,
Well, I mean,
why
I
would
agree.
you not? Like, you guys did it. What?
What are you trying to how are you resolving? Like, so when Grandpa punched Jerry in the face, he fell to the ground. And then what did they resolve? He just didn't talk about it again, right? Because he didn't want to be punched again.
I think Dad just didn't challenge him again
exactly.
because he did right.
So now you're teaching your kids that they can't challenge you. Like that's
well, but
That's
I think
arrogant.
I think
You're right. That's really arrogant
I
as
think
an
back
adult.
then that's where kids' place were.
right.
But they would
we
never
don't-
challenge.
Yeah, but that's not how we are now. We want our kids to
It's called a
challenge
fixed
us.
mindset. We want to have growth mindset kids.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
What about you, Andre?
I don't know. I think, like I say, in that situation, it's, well, what kind of house do you want to have?
Right.
Do you want to have one where they're going to feel welcome and that they're going to come back to, or one that they're never going to be a part of? And as soon as they can be away, they will be away.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. You run the risk when you
Right.
do that. Because now this place that you've tried to establish as a safe place
It's not a safe place.
is not a safe place.
That we can end that there. You want to ask the final couple of questions?
Did you want to do the book of questions?
Let's do the book of questions. So the book of questions it's actually a great book, and they oftentimes have deeper things in there. But we just go to a random page and pick something
All right.
and answer it. Ready? That was the exact same page as last time.
I was like, that one has notes.
Whoa, interesting one for you. What are your feelings about killing the severely handicapped baby at birth if the parents can't or won't care for him, and he'd require institutional care his entire life?
Holy moly.
It's heavy.
What was the first part?
What are your feelings about killing a severely
killing.
handicapped baby? By the way, this is from a book, guys. This
So
is
when
from a
it's-
book. It's called The Book of Questions by Gregory Stock, and it's meant to be discussed and to build context around. And there are no right answers to any of these, and we just figured we'd do them. Some of them are goofier than others. Some of them are not goofy.
So this is a
probably the
baby
most
that
serious
is,
one
This is
we've
a baby that's born.
So this is what are your feelings about killing a severely handicapped baby at birth if the parents
Birth.
can't or won't care for him and he'd require institutional care his entire life?
It's not legal.
It's not legal, but
It's a moral question.
it's a moral question. So this kid's gonna be severely handicapped his entire life, and he'll be institutional care his entire life. Well, you know what? Let's build context around it.
Okay.
This kid's heart is outside of his body,
Okay.
and he will have to be hooked up to that his entire life and never be able to move, really.
So, I have worked with a lot of kids who, I don't tend to work with the severely handicapped, but mine are more mild to moderate. The little boy I work with right now is mod to severe, but not fit. He doesn't have medical stuff like that. I think a lot of times their bodies give out on their own. I don't believe in keeping somebody attached to machines to keep them alive for the rest of their life like that. I think if there is hope, if they have, that's such a hard question. If they have brain activity, different situation than people that don't. But there are people that do adopt and take care of kids like that. There are institutions that they do go into. I am never for taking a kid and killing them. But I think that, there are limits as to how much work you go into if they can't breathe on their own, those kind of things. Because sometimes their bodies are not strong enough for them to stay alive. And sometimes nature does that for them. I've worked with kids who their parents struggled, their whole life to keep them alive, and then went in for a minor surgery and they punctured something and the little kid died. And it was really hard for everybody involved, but at the same time he was looking at that like being institutionalized for the rest of his life. So it was hard. It's a hard situation.
Yeah.
I don't really have a great answer for that one.
Andre?
I don't think so. I have one of my cousins, James Anthony. So I can't remember all the issues that he had, but he was kind of failure to thrive, and he was never verbal, never walked, but he lived, and he was with he was a part of the family, and he's got 4 brothers and sisters, and they miss him every day. So I don't know what you've gotten rid of Stephen Hawking. He's got he's got severe issues, but he's got one of the greatest physically. He's got issues, but he's got one of the greatest minds that we know.
Great.
A lot of the kids that are at the school my little guy goes to now that I nanny a little boy, are pretty severe, and they have like great personalities, and they're funny, and they're in reclining wheelchairs, and that's where they will be for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. But they're hysterical, and they make these, even though they're not verbal, like you walk by and they pull your clothes and then they laugh, and so it's hard because their personalities, it's just in their little souls in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if any of us put it into the situation where it's our little kid, it's not a question.
Right.
It's of course.
Right.
And anyone who has a kid can probably say the same thing.
Right.
We are also speaking from very privileged places of not having this happen. So,
right.
Mm-hmm. But I'm assuming that for the most part, it's your kid. You can do everything you possibly can.
Right. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, let's end it on our final question, which is basically, if you could go back and tell yourself something when you were pregnant about being a parent, and obviously, Andre, you weren't pregnant,
mm-hmm.
but when she was pregnant, what was the thing that you would tell yourself? Like, what's the conversation you have with yourself, and what would you say?
Knowing what I know, it's going to be hard, but this is going to be the most rewarding thing that's going to happen to you. It's going to change the way you see everything.
Cool.
I think for me, one of the biggest, what I would call my mistake that I made is, I was a latchkey kid. So all I wanted to do was be a stay-at-home mom. I was so jealous of the little kids that had notes in their lunches and a Twinkie because I had the stupid school lunch. I just wanted a note in my lunch. And so for me, from a very young age, that was very important. And so I thought being a good mother was doing all those things that they needed. So that was bringing them their homework to school. They left their jacket at home and I would run it up to the school. And in my mind, that was me caring for them. And what I realized is that I prevented them from feeling what it feels like to make mistakes so that they learn to not make those mistakes, because I was always rescuing them. They knew that they didn't have to think about it. And so it affected them later on. And actually, one of our daughters, McKinley, has some anxiety. And the counselor said to me, when she calls you with anxiety, what do? And I said, I tell her, go take a walk. Splash water in your face. She goes, that's the worst thing you could do. And I was like, no, I'm a good mother. And she said, because what if she can't get a hold of you? And it was like a huge light bulb went off in my head about all of those things where I'd rescued them. And she said, she needs a toolbox and you need to give her the tools and then let her use them. And so she said, you're actually handicapping her by not allowing her to make these mistakes or learn these things on her own. So if I would have let them be cold that day in first grade, it leads up to in high school where they leave their paper at home and I'm at work and now I'm running trying to get it to them, and because now they can't graduate. And if I would have let them make those mistakes when they were younger, they would have learned consequences and the feeling. And I was pretty good at telling them, like, if you feel bad, that's your body's way of telling you that was not a good decision. I was good at telling them those things, but then I would still rescue them. So she said, for McKinley, what you should say is, what have you done? And then let her go through the things she's done and have her use everything in her toolbox. So for me, I just think that I had this vision of just being the helper mom, which is, who I am for everybody. And I should have taken a step back and remember that I am preparing them to be alone in the world and preparing them to go out and be competent and, aware and teach them how to cook and let them experiment in the kitchen and those kind of things, so that when they leave the house, they have all of that confidence and stuff in their toolbox. So that was definitely, I tell as many people as I can of young kids, like, don't rescue them. Let them fail when it's not as important, Let them be freezing cold at school, because they won't forget the jacket the next day. And it's just hard as a mom to let that happen, because I'm like, but I could just run it up to them really quick. And I did. So that was definitely, I would change that.
Awesome.
I would have told myself to raise them to be...
Listen, Marni, chill.
Competent.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thanks, guys.
Really appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
High five.
Appreciate it.
Over the mic. 4-way. Thank you guys for listening to the show, and if you wouldn't mind heading on over to iTunes, giving us a rating, and also writing maybe a little review, telling people about the show, as well as checking out our sponsors, Perkia Rings, as well as Cat and Cloud Coffee. That's Perkia, Pyrkia. Use the code TRIBELIFE for a little discount. And if you want to go to Cat and Cloud Coffee, that's CATANDCLOUD, so Cat and Cloud Coffee, and put that in the old Google machine, pull it up, and choose anything in their store. Use code BARBERSHOP, and you can get 10% off anything in the store. All right. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. Or night, wherever you're at right now.